Hey guys, it's Steve for CollectorMania. We're here doing our continuation of the 32 deck series. We've moved on to the enemy guild pairs. The first one up is going to be Obzedat Ghost Council. As you'll see on screen, we're trying something a little different today. It should be really cool. We found out a new feature on our program and we really like it, so we're going to give it a shot. Basically, instead of going card by card, we're going to break the deck down and really show you how it runs compared to what the deck list is. We kind of figure you can check out the deck list in the description for that. So we're going to kind of make it, we're moving up production value, as we may say. With that, let's kind of break in here. Obviously, our commander is Obzedat. Really cool commander. A little hard to cast sometimes with the double white, double black. But you can kind of, fudge that and get around it by, mana fixing, your mana base being solid, stuff like that. His ability is, he comes into play and sucks 2 life from somebody and gives it to you. And then he flickers himself out and then comes back again at the beginning of your next upkeep. So, really cool card. Really unique ability. Not a lot of cards self-flicker, so I don't even know if I'd call that flicker. It's more like a phase out. I don't even know how to describe it. So, kind of our first chunk here is mana fix and ramp. There's the generic ones like Solemn Simulacrum, stuff like that. But a few highlights here, like I feel like Crypt Ghast is one to definitely focus on, especially in a deck like this. It has Extort on it. It doubles your swamps, which there's a lot of black mana in here, a lot of double black, stuff like that. It to me is a quintessential card to the deck, and really, I know a lot of people say it gets killed pretty easily, only having 2 power, 2 toughness, but I don't know. I've kept it on the board several times for quite a while. And then we've got Darksteel Ingot, Collision Relic, stuff like that. Nice group. I think a lot of people shy away from the cards that have like the Orzhov Cluestone, that kind of thing, but I think they're perfect for this type of application because they provide all the mana that you need, plus they usually have a secondary effect, like the Cluestone will draw you a card, or the Signet, what is it called? The Key Rune will turn into a creature, which sometimes becomes, really important if you just need one more blocker to survive, or you just need to get a little bit more damage in to finish somebody off. So anyway, that is mana, ramp, and fixing. On from that, we've got a really important chunk, which is card draw. I try and build a lot of card draw into all my decks. It doesn't always work 100%, but most of the time, I make it a priority. We've got, a few ones like Greed, Read the Bones, Damnable Pact is a really fun one. The ones I really wanted to focus on, though, are the guys that have the Monarchy ability. They're a newer set of cards from the last Conspiracy set. They, to me, are probably the best cards out of the entire set. They're kind of minor in a few ways. The ones that I have in here aren't too crazy. Protector of the Crown is the big one, I think. Let's see. Enters the battlefield, gives you the Monarchy. All damage that would be dealt to you is dealt to the Protector of the Crown instead. So he's defensive, but the main thing is he gets you that extra draw power. And Obzedat being almost kind of at times a Voltron commander, makes sure that you get that Monarchy back pretty much every turn. So those guys are pretty cool. And then we've got kind of her name's Timna, the Weaver. She could be a commander for a black-white deck, in my opinion. She is interesting. The ability is different. It kind of requires you to have multiple opponents, compared to just one, because that might be a little bit boring, and then attack multiple people, which this deck can definitely do. And let me read her for you real quick. She's a 3-cost legendary creature, human cleric, 2/2. She's got lifelink. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you pay X life, where X is the number of opponents that were dealt combat damage this turn. If you do, draw X cards. So, obviously, in a deck like this, you're going to be gaining all life, so paying that life to draw those cards isn't a big deal. But in her own deck, I'm sure you'd build, a lot of ways to have lifelink, life gain other ways. So, I don't know. She could be a cool experiment in the future. She's also got partner on her, so you can pair her with any of those other creatures that have partner. There's a couple big ones here like Baleful Force. Let's see. Another highlight is probably Erebos, God of the Dead. I know I've talked about this on another video before, but I cannot overstate this guy. I even have him as commander. I think I did a deck tech on Erebos. This card is amazing. especially in a deck that is gaining a lot of life like this, because paying 2 life to draw a card is no big deal to you. You're going to gain that back on your upkeep anyway, and plus there's a million other ways to gain life in here. So indestructible 5/7, and sometimes you can actually get devotion in here, so not bad. And another one of my favorites is Disciple of Bolas. This card, I don't know, has gotten me out of so many tough spots. The fact that it can come in and gain you a bunch of life and draw you a lot of cards is huge. Even if you're sacrificing Obzedat to this guy, it's not a bad thing, really. You know, just survive, basically. So anyway, that is kind of our chunk of card draw. From there, we're moving on to Recursion Graveyard Loot, as I'll call it. That might be a little bit confusing. Graveyard Loot, I would consider, is anything that comes in and steals cards from other people's graveyards. There's quite a few cards that do this in Magic, obviously, but there's some highlights here, like Ink Eyes, just kind of a tricky thing to do with Obzedat, switch them out and throw in Ink Eyes and grab somebody else's creature. Or Puppeteer Click is always a good one because it exiles the creature, so if you're playing against like graveyard strategies, sometimes you can get rid of those. And Sepulchral Primordial, really big card, we've talked about it several times, it's ridiculous. Let's see. And then kind of I would say one of the most important ones, a card that I always have a hard time putting into decks. It almost always gets booted out, but it's so cool, and I just made it a priority to put in here, is Debtor's Knell. This card, I remember back in the day, I used to play it all the time, and then it kind of just got powered out at a certain point. I'm not sure, when exactly that happened, but it being a giant enchantment that comes down doesn't necessarily do anything until your next turn. I don't know, it can be kind of risky, but when it does actually stick around and does a lot of work, I don't know, there's not another card that does what it does, really, so really cool card. Plus it's got, there is a Gary in here, so having the 3 devotion is sometimes important. And then we've got our own Recursion. We've got a Karmic Guide, really cool card. It's does everything you want it to. It's got flying protection from black. It can block. If you need to pay the echo cost, you can. You don't necessarily have to. Sometimes putting it in your graveyard is a good thing. That way you can reanimate something else. There's that. And then Palace Siege, you're probably always going to... Well, this card is interesting in this deck because you can really pick either mode and it's fine. Like Dragons would be great too because you're gaining more life and zapping more life from somebody else. Or I mainly use it for cons for the Recursion because this deck has a tendency to get its creatures killed. And then some ones that we always have like Victimize. And then a big highlight one is Phyrexian Reclamation. This card was kind of a mystery to me for a really long time because I had seen one of my buddies play with it all the time and I'd never really read the card, and finally I did and found out that it's pretty ridiculous. Just being able to pay 2 mana and get any creature from your graveyard back to your hand is really, really good. Once again, especially in a deck where you're gaining as much life as we are with this one. Then Dread Return, stuff like that. Okay. Then moving on from that, we're going to the meat of the deck, which is our life gain / steal / tax. I kind of threw a bunch of cards in here because it's a big category. The golden boy here, as I'd say, is the Aetherflux Reservoir. This card is your win condition, pretty much. You want to gain all that life, and you just want to zap somebody and just finish them off. It's a really cool card. It tends to make a bigger splash when it's late game, and that's when you can really use it, play a lot of spells, gain a lot of life, or if you've just been gaining life and no one's been swinging at you because you're a huge threat, then you just play this and, like I said, finish somebody off. Got some smaller ones in here like Soul's Attendant, which will, now you're gaining 3 life when Obzedat enters the battlefield. Pretty good. Utility land, we've got a Orzhov Church of Deals. Really cool card. My wife actually got me this years ago when I first started playing Magic as a present. It's one of those, I always talk about sentimental cards that I put in decks. This is definitely one of those. I don't know if I would necessarily be running it if it wasn't for the fact that she had gotten it for me as a present a long time ago. Still a pretty cool card though. I mean, paying 5, target opponent loses life, you gain life. Not bad. I've got one of my favorites, which is Blind Obedience. This is an Orzhov card, 100%. This just encapsulates Orzhov in my opinion. Having everybody's creatures and then artifacts, is it artifacts? Yeah, artifacts and creatures in the battlefield tapped, and then having that tax on there is amazing. This card is crazy good. Then kind of a secondary win condition almost, Blood Chief Ascension. Really cool card. Graveyards can definitely fill up pretty fast, especially with like the mass removal in this deck, so really cool card. And then just a few kind of, I don't know, secondary ones like Drawn as Emissary, Agent of Mass, just kind of little taxi kind of things. Leonin Arbiter, early game, you know, throw it out there. People can't really search for their ramp and stuff like that. Vulcan Wrath Noble, I keep trying to want to say Aristocrat, but it's Noble. He's in here because I don't have another Blood Artist. That's basically the thing. One of these days he might get replaced by Blood Artist, but I mean, he's not a bad card. I might actually just keep him in and have both of them. Maybe even just throw in the other guy too. And we've got a Blood Seeker. This card can become really big, especially when you're playing against those people that really like playing Avengers Zendikars or mass token strategies. This card's really cool. Another win condition, we've got Gary, or Grey Merchant of Asphodel. There's a ton of devotion for black in here, so even if you just have this guy in your commander, that's 4. That's not bad, but obviously you want more. But really cool card and can definitely win you the game. Cliffhaven Vampire. Camball, another commander highlight. This guy could definitely be considered for the commander spot. I think you'd build the deck a little bit differently around him. He's still interesting though. It's whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, that player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Kind of like a miniature Rurik Thar almost. As you know, with the upside of this one doesn't actually hit you as well. So, cheap commander. I could actually see him being used for like a super taxi deck. That's where I'd probably put him, like a Stacks black-white deck. We've got a card that we talked about recently on our Command Table podcast, which is Batwing Broom. I've definitely had a few games go the other direction when I played this. You know, they make a million copies with Kiki-Jiki, and then you just destroy them with Batwing Broom when they go to attack you. Okay. And then on from that, we've got a section on utility. This is mainly those cards that, honestly, I had a hard time placing, but I would definitely consider them, for the most part, utility cards. They are there kind of just to help you out in those kind of areas where you don't necessarily have a lot of support and necessarily throughout the deck. Maybe in these colors, or maybe there's just not a whole lot of it. The first one kind of goes against that, which is Vault of the Archangel. It, to me, is a way to gain a bunch of life, but it's also very defensive. You can kind of just sit on it, especially if your opponents know what you have. You know, with your mana base, and you just have a ton of tokens or whatever creatures. This deck doesn't really make a ton of tokens. A bunch of creatures, and you can just like park behind that, and they don't want to swing at you because you just at any time you could just give your entire army Death Touch. So, pretty cool. And then we've got Viserys here, sack outlet. Also kind of a way to fix your draws if you need to. New edition Panharmonicron. This card's ridiculous. I'll probably put it into any deck as long as it's legal. Especially anything that has a lot of ETBs, which this deck definitely does. Obzedat being the main one, because this'll definitely help you out with him. Especially, you know, you have this and the Reservoir out. Ooh, that's a bad day for your opponents. And then we've got Elixir of Mortality, you know, just a reshuffle. 2 Planeswalkers, we got Elspeth, Knight Errant, really just there for the Voltron aspect to give Obzedat the flying and +3/+3. You know, sometimes you can actually finish people off with commander damage in this deck. I don't really go for anything else with this. You can make the tokens and try and get to the ultimate, but it's not really gonna, you know, help you. We've got Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, once again, kind of there for the Voltron aspect of it, making that -2 and then making that emblem, making Obzedat that much more threatening. Pretty cool. And since it is an emblem, it's going to stick around. It's not like something that's tied to Obzedat. So I believe at one point this deck had a lot of like swords and stuff like that, and it just became too tedious to re-equip every time and all that other stuff. And I know there's ways to kind of get around that, you know, like with Hero's Blade and stuff like that. But I don't need another straight-on Voltron deck. I wanted something a little bit different. And then a card that, like I started talking about, I didn't really have another place for this, but Ophiomancer, I put it in utility because I guess I'd consider it utility, or there's a whole bunch of other stuff. In a way, it's almost like removal too, because it creates a Death Touch token. So I mean, it's defensive. I love this card. I know I try and put it in pretty much anything that has black in it. It's great early game. It's great late game. It's just a cool card. And then we're going to get into removal here. I broke it up in two sections here. I've got spot removal, and then I've got mass removal and sacrifice. And this deck focuses a lot on all three of those, really. First up, we've got like Orzhov Charm, just some kind of generic ones. Return to Dust is a really big one we've talked about before. Path to Exile, Go for the Throat, Tragic Slip. The I guess most common things that you'll see in these types of decks. And then we've got stuff that I'd like to highlight, like Mortify. It's one of those cards that has dual purpose, which, as I've said millions of times, really I like. Being able to destroy a creature or an enchantment is amazing. And another big highlight one is Utter End. I know that there's a lot of cards that have this type of effect, and this one is cool because it costs one more mana than most of them, but it also doesn't really have a drawback. Like, you're not going to pay any life, you're not, doing anything crazy, you're not jumping through hoops to use it. It costs a little bit more, but sometimes that's okay. Big highlight here as well is Ashen Rider. This card with Recursion is stupid. People will usually try and get rid of it as soon as they see it for good reason. It's not only destroying the permanent, it's exiling it, so that's sometimes really big. You can exile somebody's win condition, and then what are they going to do? Just sit there and be cower because they don't want to destroy the 5/5 and lose something else. And then kind of the old school version of this is Angel of Despair. Really cool card. I remember back in the day when this thing was like $30 and I would never pick it up just because of the price tag. Now, thankfully, with a lot of things, I guess the power creep going up in Magic, this card has become a lot more accessible. Really cool. I love the artwork. Awesome card. This is definitely a highlight of the deck. Deathbringer Liege. If you read this card and realize what it does, and read Obzedat and realize what it does, you are in gold if you have these two out at the same time. Like, it makes them huge. It also says that, when you play your commander, essentially you're going to destroy something, or you're going to tap something, you're going to destroy something. And then there's a ton of black-white spells in here that will also do that, like your Necrotic Slivers, your stuff like that. So this card is awesome. Yeah, Necrotic Sliver, actually. On from that. Okay. And then we're moving into the mass removal / sacrifice. First up, there's a few just generic board wipes, like Deadly Tempest is kind of one that people don't really use that often. It came out in a Commander product. It's destroy all creatures. Each player loses life equal to the number of creatures he or she controlled that were destroyed this way. Really cool with Obzedat. You're gaining a bunch of life. What do you care? Toxic Deluge is a really big one. Rout is one that I really, really like in this deck. Being able to do it at instant speed, so your commander is usually out of the game, so he just comes back in and you're fine. Stuff like that. Creature mass board wipe, Magister of Worth. Usually you end up playing this and you end up with the angel and everybody else doesn't have creatures, so it's a pretty cool card. Okay, and then from that we've got our sack. Essentially, it's pretty generic in black. I think we've covered this in other decks too, like Fleshbag Marauder and Butcher of Malakir and Dictate of Erebos. All three of them are great. The Dictate probably being the best out of the three. Just flash enchantments are really cool. And then we've got our dual lands. One thing that I kind of focused on when I was building these decks is trying to budget them. When you build as many decks as I have, you really land bases are probably the most expensive part of most decks. Besides like the big cards like Sylvan Libraries and stuff like that. But I don't know, you can really kind of fudge it on your land base most of the time, especially in like dual color decks. You can kind of play around with it a little bit. So we've got a few really good ones, and like there's Vivid Meadow, which is really cheap. It's a budget one, I'd say. Scoured Barrens. There we go. Gosh, can't talk. That it probably costs like 10 cents. It's not a big deal. Concealed Courtyard's a little bit more expensive, but I probably pulled that in a pack and just threw it in here. That's kind of what you can do. You can supplement your lands where you find them, essentially. Like, if you find one in a pack and it's really good, just throw it in a deck. If you are building as many decks as I want to or have done, maybe just kind of scavenge through your stuff and see what you have. Like highlights, like Isolated Chapel is a really big one. I always recommend Godless Shrine, if you have it, is really cool. Just those regular dual lands. So anyway, that is the deck. let us know if this new format works out for you. I think it's going to be great. I think it looks awesome. And of course, you know, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let us know what you're thinking. And that is the deck. Thanks, guys.